You think you're so special, don't you? A bleeding heart, a saint in a grease-stained apron. Well, guess what, Caleb? Compassion doesn't pay the bills, and it certainly doesn't pay my bills. You just cost this company profit, and you just cost yourself a job. Get out. Now. The words, sharp as shattered glass, echoed through the small, sterile repair shop, each syllable a hammer blow against Caleb's already bruised spirit. He felt the weight of his boss's contempt, a tangible, suffocating presence, pressing down on him, grinding him into the cold, polished concrete floor. The woman, Natalie, the one whose phone he had just fixed, stood frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and profound, unutterable guilt. Her silent apology, a desperate plea in her gaze, was almost as painful as the boss's fury. What had he done? He had simply tried to help. And for that, he was being cast out, a pariah in the world he had meticulously built for himself, a world that now crumbled around him, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. Before we begin, tell me in the comments what city you're listening to this story from. The air in Tech Solutions Seattle always carried a faint, almost imperceptible tang of ozone and burnt plastic, a scent Caleb had grown to associate with purpose, with the quiet satisfaction of bringing dead things back to life. For Caleb, a man whose existence often felt as disassembled as the devices he repaired, this scent was a comfort. He was a man of quiet competence, his hands calloused and nimble, a testament to countless hours spent coaxing logic boards back into submission, replacing fractured screens, and diagnosing the myriad digital ailments that plagued modern life. His face, usually a canvas of focused concentration, was etched with the subtle lines of a man who had seen a little too much of the world's indifference, but who still stubbornly chose to believe in its inherent goodness. His dark hair, perpetually a little disheveled, framed eyes that held a surprising depth, a wellspring of empathy that often went unnoticed beneath the practical exterior of a technician. Today, however, the familiar scent was soured by the metallic tang of fear and a bitter, rising despair. Caleb stood amidst the organized chaos of his workbench, the miniature tools, the microscopic screws, the glowing schematics on his secondary monitor. All suddenly feeling alien, meaningless, his heart, usually a steady drumbeat of quiet efficiency, now throbbed with a frantic, irregular rhythm. A bird trapped within a cage of libs. The words of his boss, Mr. Harrison, still grated in his ears, an unwelcome, invasive hum that drowned out the usual white noise of the city outside, the distant rumble of buses, the persistent patter of Seattle rain against the shop's large glass front, the muted chatter of customers browsing accessories. He felt a profound hollowness blossoming in his chest, an emptiness that threatened to consume the very core of his being. It was the feeling of a foundation crumbling, of the ground beneath him turning to quicksand. His hands, usually so steady, trembled almost imperceptibly as he picked up a discarded screen protector, his reflection in its glossy surface, a distorted, unfamiliar stranger. Caleb was a creature of habit, of routine, of the quiet, methodical precision required to mend the intricate circuitry of a smartphone. His life in Seattle had been a series of small, hard-won victories. Rent paid on time, a decent meal on the table, the occasional indulgence in a good book or a rare vinyl record. He wasn't wealthy, not by any stretch of the imagination, but he was stable. He had built a life on the bedrock of his skills, his dedication, and perhaps most dangerously, his compassion. This last quality, he was now painfully aware, was a liability in a world that valued profit above all else. He often found himself drawn to the stories behind the broken devices, the shattered screen of a child's tablet, the water-damaged phone of a student, the unresponsive device of an elderly person. Each one was a life disrupted, a connection severed. He saw beyond the gadget. He saw the human impact, and sometimes that impact was too much to ignore. The central conflict of his life, it seemed, had just erupted in a catastrophic burst. He, Caleb, the quiet technician, had committed the unforgivable sin of empathy in a capitalist landscape. He had given away service, a cardinal sin in Mr. Harrison's ledger. The stakes were immediate and terrifying. Financial hardship loomed, a dark, hungry shadow. But the long-term stakes were far more insidious. A creeping despair, a gnawing guilt. He had gambled his security on a moment of pure, unadulterated human kindness, and he had lost everything. The image of Natalie's tear-streaked face, her almost desperate gratitude, flickered behind his eyes, a phantom pain. He had seen the genuine distress in her posture, the quiet desperation in her voice, and something deep within him, something he couldn't control, had simply reached out to help. Now, that impulse had cost him his livelihood. The irony was a bitter pill, one he struggled to swallow. This was his life now, an act of kindness repaid with unemployment, a stark reminder that the world often punished the gentle and rewarded the ruthless. The rainy, gray Seattle sky outside seemed to mock his internal turmoil, reflecting the dull, aching void that had suddenly opened up in his future. Caleb's days at Tech Solutions Seattle often began before the city fully woke, the pre-dawn quiet a balm to his soul. He'd arrive, unlock the heavy glass door, and the faint scent of stale coffee from the previous day would greet him, quickly replaced by the cleaner, sharper smell of circuit boards and the faint, sweet chemical tang of screen cleaner as he prepped his station. His workbench was his sanctuary, a meticulously organized array of tiny screwdrivers, spudgers, tweezers, and a microscope that could reveal the intricate universe hidden within a smartphone. He found a profound, almost meditative peace in the precise, repetitive movements of his work. Each broken device was a puzzle, a challenge to his intellect and dexterity. He loved the moment of triumph, when a dead screen flickered back to life, or a silent speaker suddenly crackled with sound. It was more than just a job. It was a craft, a calling, a way to impose order on a chaotic world, one tiny component at a time. His compassion, as Mr. Harrison had so vehemently pointed out, wasn't a sudden impulsive trait. It was deeply ingrained, a thread woven through the fabric of his character from an early age. He remembered, as a boy, finding a bird with a broken wing and spending hours, with the help of his grandmother, fashioning a splint and nursing it back to health. The memory brought a bittersweet pang now. Even then, the impulse to alleviate suffering, however small, had been powerful. In his current role, this often manifested as small, unrecorded acts of generosity. A student with a cracked tablet and empty pockets might find their repair bill inexplicably reduced. An elderly woman struggling with a slow phone might receive a free diagnostic and a patient, unhurried explanation of how to optimize her settings. These were not grand gestures, merely quiet extensions of himself, ripples of kindness in an often indifferent world. He remembered a particularly frigid Tuesday morning, just a few months prior, when an elderly man, bundled in a threadbare coat, had brought in a flip phone, its ancient battery finally giving up the ghost. The man had looked utterly lost, his eyes wide with a quiet panic. My wife, she's in the hospital, he'd rasped, his voice thin with worry. This is the only way I can. She calls me every morning. Caleb had seen the faded photo on the phone's worn shell, a smiling, younger couple. He'd known immediately that the man couldn't afford a new battery, let alone a new phone. Mr. Harrison's strict no freebies policy had echoed in his mind, but it was quickly drowned out by the image of the man's profound distress. He'd told the man to wait, disappeared into the back, and returned moments later with a new battery, carefully installing it, his movements gentle and deliberate. He'd watched the old man's face light up as the tiny screen flickered on, a silent testament to a connection restored. No charge, Caleb had murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, avoiding eye contact as he handed the phone back. Just make sure you call her. The old man had simply nodded, tears welling in his eyes, clutching the phone like a lifeline. He hadn't said thank you, but the look in his eyes had been more profound than any words. Caleb had felt a warmth spread through his chest, a quiet satisfaction that was far more valuable than the cost of a battery. It was these moments, these small, unacknowledged acts of grace, that truly nourished him, that gave meaning to the endless parade of broken electronics. His relationship with his colleagues was cordial, if somewhat distant. They were good people, mostly, but they lacked his particular brand of quiet idealism. Leo, the youngest technician, a whirlwind of nervous energy and pop culture references, would often tease him. Caleb, you're gonna get fired one of these days, giving away all that free labor. Harrison's got eyes everywhere, man. Caleb would just offer a small, knowing smile, a slight shrug. He understood the risk, but the pull of his conscience was stronger than the fear of reprimand. He believed that sometimes the value of a connection, the solace of a voice, the comfort of an image, transcended monetary worth. He believed in the inherent dignity of every person who walked through the shop door, regardless of their financial standing. The shop itself, nestled between a trendy coffee shop and a bustling bookstore in a slightly older but rapidly gentrifying part of Seattle, was a microcosm of the city itself, a constant flow of people, each with their own stories, their own burdens, their own digital lifelines. The scent of rain-soaked asphalt often mingled with the aroma of roasting coffee beans drifting in from next door, a comforting, familiar blend that usually grounded Caleb. But these days, a subtle tension had begun to permeate the air at Tech Solutions. Sales targets were up, profit margins were scrutinized, and Mr. Harrison's already severe demeanor had grown even more hawkish. He was a man carved from granite, all sharp angles and unyielding principles, his eyes like cold, calculating sensors. He embodied the corporate ethos in its purest, most unforgiving form. Caleb knew he was on thin ice, that his small acts of rebellion against the bottom line were being noted, compiled. He just hadn't realized how thin that ice truly was, until now. The chill that ran through him was not from the Seattle weather, but from the dawning realization that his quiet acts of humanity were about to cost him everything. The day Natalie walked into Tech Solutions Seattle and started like any other, cloaked in the perpetual, soft gray light that defined Seattle's autumns. The rain had been falling in a persistent, almost hypnotic drizzle since dawn, painting the city in muted watercolors. Caleb had been engrossed in replacing the delicate digitizer on an iPad, his magnifying visor pulled low, the tiny components a universe under his skilled fingers. The rhythmic click of his tools, the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. and the distant murmur of traffic outside had formed a familiar symphony of his workday. Then, the bell above the shop door jingled, a sharper, more insistent sound than usual, cutting through the ambient drone. Caleb didn't look up immediately, accustomed to the ebb and flow of customers. But a subtle shift in the shop's atmosphere, a sudden stillness, made him pause. He lifted his head, pushing the visor up, and saw her. She stood just inside the entrance, clutching a smartphone to her chest like a fragile bird. Her hair, a cascade of rich dark waves, was damp and clung to her face, a face that was pale and streaked with fresh tears. Her eyes, a startling shade of hazel, were wide and red-rimmed, brimming with a raw, almost desperate anguish that pulled at something deep within Caleb. Her clothes, though simple, a dark, practical jacket and jeans, somehow seemed to emphasize her vulnerability, clinging slightly to her frame. She looked utterly lost, a shipwrecked soul adrift in the sterile environment of the tech shop. Can someone help me?" Her voice was a fragile whisper, thick with unshed tears, barely audible above the gentle thrum of the shop. It held a peculiar, resonant quality, even in its brokenness, like a cello string vibrating with sorrow. Leo, who was usually quick to greet customers with his practiced, cheerful patter, seemed momentarily stunned into silence by the sheer intensity of her distress. He gestured vaguely towards Caleb. Caleb's our best. He can—" Caleb felt an immediate, instinctive tug of empathy. He pushed himself away from his workbench, a quiet concern settling over him. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his voice softer than usual, an unconscious effort to create a space of calm around her. He moved towards the counter, his steps measured, a silent promise of help in his approach. The scent of her rain-dampened clothes, a faint, clean smell of fresh air, and a hint of something floral, reached him, mingling with the shop's ozone. She slowly approached the counter, placing the phone down with trembling hands. It was a high-end model, a sleek, expensive device, but it was utterly unresponsive. Its screen was black, a void, a digital tomb. "It just died," she choked out, her voice breaking on the last word. "I was on a call. My sister, she's in the hospital. I need to know if she's okay. I need to call her back. Please. It has all my contacts. Everything." A fresh wave of tears welled up, spilling silently down her cheeks. She didn't make a scene, didn't raise her voice, but the quiet desperation was far more potent than any outburst. It felt like a wound laid bare. Caleb picked up the phone, his fingers brushing hers for a fleeting second. Her skin was cool, almost clammy. He could feel the residual tremor in her touch. He ran a quick diagnostic, his mind already racing through potential causes. A dead battery, a faulty charging port, a more serious motherboard issue. His practiced eyes scanned the device, seeking clues. He tried the usual tricks. The hard reset, the charging cable. Nothing. The phone remained stubbornly inert, a useless slab of glass and metal. "Have you tried charging it?" he asked gently, though he could see the charging port was clean. The cable she held in her hand looked perfectly fine. She nodded, a small, jerky movement. "All morning. It just won't turn on. I don't know what happened. I really need to talk to her." She looked up at him, her eyes pleading, raw. I don't have a lot of cash on me right now. I just rushed out of the hospital." Caleb's internal monologue flared. No cash, hospital, sister, desperation. Mr. Harrison's rules, strict and unyielding, immediately surfaced in his mind. No credit, no service, no exceptions. But the image of the old man and his flip phone, the quiet gratitude, the profound relief, also surfaced, far more powerful. He looked at Natalie, truly saw her, and the rules faded into a distant, inconsequential hum. This wasn't about profit. This was about human connection, about alleviating suffering. This was about a sister, possibly in crisis, and a woman who was clearly at the end of her tether. "Let me take a look," he said, his voice firm, decisive. "It might just be a battery issue, or something simple. Give me a few minutes." He didn't ask for her name, didn't mention payment. He simply offered help, a silent promise. He retreated to his workbench, the phone carefully cradled in his palm. He worked with a focused intensity, his movements economical and precise. He opened the phone, a delicate operation requiring specialized tools and a steady hand. The inner workings were pristine, no signs of water damage or physical trauma. He systematically checked the power circuits, the battery connectors, the various internal ribbons. The problem wasn't immediately apparent. His brow furrowed in concentration. He pulled out his multimeter, testing voltage, continuity. He could feel Natalie's anxious gaze on him, a palpable weight from the counter. He took a deep breath, pushing away the pressure, focusing solely on the intricate components before him. Then, he found it. A tiny, almost microscopic fault in a power IC, a component responsible for managing the phone's charging and power distribution. It was a tricky fix, requiring micro-soldering, a skill few technicians possessed. It wasn't a quick battery swap. This was serious. This would be expensive. And she had no cash. His heart gave a small, painful lurch. He knew what he had to do. He could charge her for the diagnostic, tell her it was a complex motherboard repair, and quote a prohibitive price. Mr. Harrison would approve, but the image of her tear-streaked face, the raw vulnerability, flashed before his eyes. He couldn't. He simply couldn't. He took another deep breath, the decision firming in his mind. He reached for his micro-soldering station, the tiny iron heating up with a faint metallic scent. He carefully, painstakingly worked on the microscopic chip, his hands steady, his concentration absolute. Time seemed to stretch and warp around him. The delicate dance of solder and circuit, the careful alignment of components, the breath-held moments of precision. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only 20 minutes, he reassembled the phone, his movements as fluid as always. He pressed the power button. For a moment, nothing. Then a faint vibration, and the familiar logo of the phone manufacturer bloomed to life on the screen, a beacon in the digital darkness. Caleb felt a surge of quiet triumph, a familiar satisfaction that transcended the technical. He carried the phone back to the counter, the glowing screen a testament to his skill, and more importantly, his humanity. Natalie watched him, her breath held, a silent prayer in her eyes. "It's working," he said, his voice quiet, a slight smile touching his lips. He handed the phone back to her. It was a minor power issue. All fixed. She took the phone, her hands still trembling slightly, but this time with a mixture of disbelief and profound relief. She stared at the illuminated screen, then at Caleb, her eyes wide, shining with fresh tears. But these were tears of gratitude. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You fixed it. Thank you. Thank you so much." She fumbled in her bag, pulling out a thin, almost empty wallet. "How much do I owe you?" Caleb hesitated for a fraction of a second, his gaze flickering towards the back office, where Mr. Harrison's shadow usually loomed. He knew the risk. He knew the consequences. But looking into her eyes, Seeing the sheer weight of relief that had just lifted from her shoulders, he couldn't bring himself to charge her. The internal battle was brief, decisive. "Don't worry about it," he said, his voice gentle, a quiet conviction in his tone. "Consider it on the house. Just make sure your sister's okay." He offered her a genuine, reassuring smile, a rare glimpse of the warmth that lay beneath his reserved exterior. The scent of ozone and burning dust from the soldering iron still lingered faintly on his hands, a reminder of the intricate work he had just performed. Not just on a phone, but on a human heart. Her eyes widened further, a gasp escaping her lips. "Are you serious? But it must have taken you ages, and all those tiny things." She gestured vaguely towards his workbench, still reeling from the unexpected generosity. "I can't just—" "It's fine," Caleb insisted, a subtle firmness in his voice. He didn't want to make a big deal of it. "Go call your sister. That's all that matters right now." He felt a strange lightness in his chest, a fleeting sense of peace that momentarily eclipsed the lurking fear of his boss's inevitable wrath. He watched as she stared at him, a complex mix of emotions swirling in her hazel eyes. Gratitude, astonishment, and a touch of something else he couldn't quite decipher. "Thank you," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper, imbued with a depth of feeling that made the simple words resonate. I don't know how to thank you. I'll remember this." She clutched the phone, her lifeline restored, and with one last lingering look of profound appreciation, she turned and walked out of the shop, the bell jingling softly behind her, a small, almost imperceptible chime that marked a turning point. Caleb watched her go, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. He knew he had done the right thing. He felt the familiar warmth of purpose, of having made a small difference in someone's overwhelming day. He walked back to his workbench, picking up his tools, the familiar weight of them a comfort in his hand. He was preparing to resume his work, to lose himself in the intricate world of microcircuitry, when a voice, cold and sharp as a winter wind, sliced through the quiet. "Caleb!" He froze, his hand still poised over a tiny screw. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The air suddenly grew heavy, thick with unspoken accusation. The subtle scent of rain and coffee vanished, replaced by the acrid smell of impending confrontation. He slowly turned, his heart sinking with a terrible, icy dread. Mr. Harrison stood in the doorway of his office, a dark, imposing figure, his arms crossed, his face a mask of furious displeasure. His eyes, usually just cold, now blazed with an icy fire. He had clearly been watching. Every movement, every word, every act of compassion had been meticulously observed, recorded, judged. The silent, almost imperceptible betrayal of the small act had been caught. "Care to explain what I just saw?" Mr. Harrison's voice was low, dangerous, each word a carefully aimed dart. Caleb felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He swallowed, trying to find his voice, to formulate an explanation, a defense. She was in distress, sir. Her sister's in the hospital. She had no cash. It was a quick fix, just a power IC. I couldn't just—" "You couldn't just what, Caleb?" Harrison's voice rose, losing its dangerous calm, bordering on a shout. "You couldn't just follow company policy? You couldn't just uphold the very rules that keep this business afloat? You gave away a micro-soldering repair. Do you have any idea what that costs? The labor, the expertise, the time? Time that translates directly into money, Caleb. Our money." He took a step forward, his presence growing, filling the small space between them. The overhead fluorescent lights seemed to hum louder. The air crackled with the sheer force of his anger. "It was a small act of kindness," Caleb mumbled, his voice barely audible, shame and defiance warring within him. He felt his cheeks flush, the heat rising despite the cold dread in his stomach. He wasn't ashamed of what he had done, but he was ashamed of the situation, the confrontation, the inevitable fallout. "Kindness?" Harrison scoffed, the sound a harsh, dismissive bark. "Kindness doesn't pay for the rent, Caleb. Kindness doesn't pay your salary. Kindness certainly doesn't pay for my new car. This isn't a charity. This is a business that you just undermined, for the 10th time this month, might I add." He paused, his chest heaving slightly with barely controlled fury. "You think you're so special, don't you? A bleeding heart, a saint in a grease-stained apron. Well, guess what, Caleb? Compassion doesn't pay the bills, and it certainly doesn't pay my bills. You just cost this company profit, and you just cost yourself a job. Get out! Now!" The words, sharp as shattered glass, echoed through the small, sterile repair shop, each syllable a hammer blow against Caleb's already bruised spirit. He felt the weight of his boss's contempt, a tangible, suffocating presence, pressing down on him, grinding him into the cold, polished concrete floor. The finality of "Get out! Now!" hung in the air, a chilling pronouncement that stripped him of his identity, his purpose, his future. The sound of his own breathing seemed deafening in the sudden, cavernous silence that followed Harrison's outburst. Leo, his young colleague, stood frozen behind the counter, his face pale, his eyes wide with shock and a helpless sympathy. Caleb felt a strange disconnect, as if the scene were playing out in slow motion, detached from his own body. He looked around the shop, his eyes lingering on his workbench, his tools, the carefully organized array that had been his world for so long. It was all being taken from him, snatched away in a single, brutal moment. The scent of ozone, usually a comfort, now felt like the burning tang of his own ruined hopes. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. There was no point. Harrison's decision was absolute, unyielding. He simply nodded, a slow, numb movement. The injustice of it, the sheer brutality of being punished for an act of pure, selfless humanity, was a physical ache in his chest. But beneath the ache, a flicker of something else, a stubborn refusal to regret his actions. He had helped someone in genuine need. He had chosen compassion over profit. And if that meant losing his job, then perhaps this wasn't the place for him anyway. But the thought offered little solace amidst the crushing weight of unemployment. He slowly, deliberately, began to gather his personal belongings from his workbench. His worn leather tool roll, a gift from his grandfather, his favorite ceramic mug with a chipped rim, a small, framed photo of his dog, Buster, a scruffy terrier mix with an eternally optimistic grin. Each item felt heavy, imbued with the sudden significance of a life being dismantled. As he placed them carefully into a small backpack, his hands, usually so steady, trembled almost imperceptibly. The metallic tang of fear in the air now mingled with the bitter taste of defeat. Mr. Harrison watched him, his posture rigid, his face still contorted with anger. He offered no word of farewell, no hint of regret. He simply observed, a cold, unfeeling sentinel overseeing the expulsion of a problem. When Caleb had packed the last item, he turned, his gaze meeting Harrison's for a brief, defiant moment. There was no apology in Caleb's eyes, only a profound sorrow and a quiet resolve. He knew he was walking away from stability, from the only life he had known for years. He knew the financial hardship would be immediate, crushing. The guilt of potential destitution, of not being able to provide for himself, was a heavy cloak settling over his shoulders. But he also carried a different weight, the silent, unshakable conviction that he had done the right thing. He walked past the counter, past a pale and silent Leo, and towards the door. The sound of his own footsteps on the polished concrete floor seemed unnaturally loud, echoing the emptiness that had suddenly opened up in his life. He pushed open the heavy glass door, the bell jingling one last time, a mournful chime marking his exit. The cold, damp Seattle air enveloped him, a stark contrast to the sterile warmth of the shop. He stepped out into the persistent drizzle, the gray sky mirroring the desolation in his soul. He was unemployed, adrift, and utterly alone. His only companion, the profound, unsettling silence of a future suddenly stripped bare. He walked away from Tech Solutions Seattle, not just leaving a job, but leaving behind a piece of himself, a carefully constructed life now shattered by a single compassionate act. The rain began to fall harder, washing over his face, indistinguishable from the tears that threatened to well in his own eyes. The world felt vast and indifferent, and he, Caleb, the quiet technician, was just a small, insignificant figure, swallowed by the immensity of it all. The weight of his decision, the sheer, crushing reality of his unemployment, settled upon him with an almost physical force, leaving him gasping for breath in the cold, wet Seattle air. Tell me in the comments what city you're listening to this story from. Like and share with someone who loves emotional stories. The days that followed Caleb's dismissal were a blur of grays and shadows, much like the Seattle sky that seemed to weep incessantly. The immediate shock had given way to a dull, persistent ache, a constant hum of anxiety beneath the surface of his skin. His small apartment, usually a haven of quiet comfort, now felt like a cage, its familiar walls pressing in on him. He found himself pacing, restless, the silence amplifying the frantic whispers of his fears. The scent of old coffee and worn books that usually filled his living space now seemed stale, heavy with the weight of his despair. He tried to distract himself, to find some semblance of the routine that had once anchored him. He'd clean his apartment with a meticulousness born of nervous energy, wiping down surfaces until they gleamed, arranging his few possessions with an almost obsessive precision. He'd brew strong coffee, the bitter aroma filling the air, and sit by the window, watching the rain fall, each droplet a tiny, shimmering reminder of the unyielding passage of time. He'd watch the blurred figures of people hurrying past, shielded by umbrellas, each one seemingly with a purpose, a destination, a life that hadn't just imploded. The sight only deepened his isolation. His internal monologues became a relentless, self-flagellating loop. Was it worth it? Was that one moment of kindness truly worth losing everything? He replayed the scene with Natalie, then with Mr. Harrison, over and over, dissecting every word, every gesture. He knew deep down that he couldn't have acted differently. The image of Natalie's tear-streaked face, the raw panic in her eyes, had been too powerful, too compelling. His conscience, that stubborn, insistent voice within him, would not have allowed him to turn her away. But conviction, he was learning did not pay the rent. It did not buy food. It did not quiet the gnawing fear of an uncertain future. The financial hardship began to manifest almost immediately. His savings, never substantial, dwindled with alarming speed. Rent was due. Utility bills piled up, their stark numbers a constant, mocking presence. He started cutting back, making his meager groceries last longer, foregoing his beloved coffee shop visits. The small indulgences that had once brightened his solitary life, a new book, a vinyl record, a decent meal out, became luxuries he could no longer even contemplate. The weight of his guilt intensified, a heavy stone in his gut. He was supposed to be self-sufficient, capable. He had always prided himself on his independence, his ability to navigate the world on his own terms. Now, that independence felt like a cruel joke. He began the arduous, soul-crushing process of job searching. He polished his resume, highlighting his technical skills, his years of experience, his dedication. He applied to every repair shop, every electronics store, every tech company he could find in Seattle. He spent hours hunched over his laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating the lines of worry etched deeper into his face. Each application sent felt like a fragile hope, a tiny paper boat launched onto a vast, stormy ocean. The rejections, when they came, were polite but firm. Impersonal emails that felt like personal affronts. Thank you for your interest. We have decided to move forward with other candidates. Each one chipped away at his dwindling self-esteem, reinforcing the bitter truth that his skill, his experience, was now tainted by the stain of his dismissal. He wondered if Mr. Harrison had put out feelers, if his reputation had been quietly, effectively, destroyed within the close-knit tech community of Seattle. The thought was a chilling one, a cold hand squeezing his heart. One particularly bleak afternoon, the rain drumming a relentless rhythm against his window, Caleb found himself staring at his phone, a generic, reliable model that he had personally maintained for years. It was a perfect piece of technology, always working, always connecting him. But now, it felt like a symbol of everything he had lost. His hands, usually so confident and skilled, felt useless, idle. The urge to fix something, anything, was a restless energy under his skin. But there was nothing to fix, and no place to fix it. He felt a profound sense of loss, not just of a job, but of his identity, of the purpose that had defined him for so long. He remembered the feeling of the delicate micro-soldering iron in his hand, the absolute concentration required for the intricate repair on Natalie's phone. The memory, usually a source of pride, now brought a fresh wave of despair. That act, that precise moment of triumph, had been the catalyst for his downfall. He closed his eyes, pressing the heels of his hands against them, trying to push away the encroaching darkness. He felt a profound loneliness, a sense of being utterly adrift in a world that had no place for him. The stakes had indeed proven to be high, and he was losing. He thought of his dog, Buster, whom he had left with his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, when his financial situation became too precarious. The decision had torn at him, a raw wound in his heart. Buster, with his unconditional love and goofy enthusiasm, had been his anchor, his constant companion. To give him up, even temporarily, had felt like a betrayal. "Just until I get back on my feet, boy," he had whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears, as he hugged the bewildered dog goodbye. The memory of Buster's trusting eyes, his soft fur against Caleb's cheek, was a fresh pang of guilt. He had failed even his dog. The days bled into weeks, each one a testament to his increasing isolation. He rarely left his apartment, only venturing out for essential groceries, becoming a ghost in his own neighborhood. His once neat appearance became neglected, his hair longer, his clothes more rumpled. The vibrant energy that had once defined his meticulous focus was replaced by a weary lethargy. He felt trapped in a suffocating cycle of despair, each passing day eroding a little more of his hope. The city outside, once a source of quiet inspiration, now felt indifferent, its bustling energy a mocking contrast to his stagnant existence. He was sinking, slowly but surely, into an abyss of self-doubt and financial ruin. Each new rejection letter, a fresh shovelful of dirt burying him deeper. The future, once a clear path, was now a dense, impenetrable fog, and Caleb, usually so adept at navigating the intricate, hidden paths of technology, found himself utterly lost in the labyrinth of his own despair. The knock on his apartment door was so unexpected, so jarring, that Caleb almost didn't answer it. He had grown accustomed to the relentless quiet, broken only by the mournful wail of the wind or the distant rumble of the city. He rarely received visitors. His friends were few, his family distant. He assumed it was a delivery person, or perhaps Mrs. Henderson, checking in on him. He dragged himself from the worn armchair by the window, his movements heavy, sluggish, the very act of walking feeling like an immense effort. He peered through the peephole, his brow furrowed in confusion. A woman stood on his doorstep, her back to him, gazing out at the perpetually gray Seattle sky. Her dark hair, elegantly styled, was instantly recognizable, and the expensive, tailored coat she wore, even from a glimpse, spoke of a world far removed from his own. It was Natalie. A jolt, a mixture of surprise and apprehension, shot through Caleb. Why was she here? Had she tracked him down to finally pay him? Or worse, had Mr. Harrison sent her, a final, cruel twist of the knife, to rub salt in his already festering wounds? His heart began to pound with a frantic, irregular rhythm, a sudden burst of activity in the stagnant pond of his existence. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorknob. He felt a sudden, profound embarrassment at his unkempt appearance, his unwashed hair, the weary shadows beneath his eyes. He wasn't ready to face anyone, especially not someone who had witnessed his downfall. But then she turned, as if sensing his presence. Her hazel eyes, no longer red-rimmed and tearful, were bright, focused, and held a warmth that was both disarming and intriguing. A small, gentle smile touched her lips. He slowly, cautiously, opened the door, just a crack. "Natalie?" His voice was a little hoarse from disuse, thin and tentative. The scent of her perfume, a subtle, elegant fragrance, drifted into his apartment, an alien presence in the stale air. "Caleb," she said, her voice clear and melodious, a stark contrast to the broken whisper he remembered. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I felt I needed to find you." She gestured vaguely. "I got your address from the shop. It took a little convincing and a bit of persuasion, but I managed it." There was a hint of steel in her tone now, a quiet authority he hadn't noticed before. He opened the door wider, stepping back, a silent invitation to enter, though he felt a pang of self-consciousness about the state of his apartment. "Come in," he murmured, ushering her into the small living room. The rain, as if on cue, began to fall harder, drumming against the window pane. She stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the modest, slightly cluttered space, but there was no judgment in her eyes, only a quiet observation. She took a seat on his worn sofa, her posture elegant, composed. Caleb remained standing, feeling awkward, exposed. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions. He could feel the warmth radiating from her, a stark contrast to the cold desolation that had become his constant companion. "I heard what happened," Natalie began, her voice softening, a note of genuine regret in her tone. "Your boss, Mr. Harrison, he fired you, didn't he, for fixing my phone?" Caleb nodded, a bitter taste in his mouth. "He did. Said compassion doesn't pay the bills." He tried to sound nonchalant, but the words still stung, still carried the weight of his humiliation. Natalie's expression hardened, a flash of anger in her eyes. "That's despicable, truly. I never intended for that to happen. I felt terrible when I found out. I went back to the shop, a few days later, to pay you, to properly thank you. And that's when I learned. He was quite proud of himself, actually, for upholding his policy." Her voice dripped with disdain when she mimicked Harrison. Caleb looked away, a fresh wave of shame washing over him. "It's fine," he mumbled, though it was far from fine. "I made my choice. I knew the risks." "But it wasn't just your choice, Caleb," Natalie countered, her voice firm, rising slightly. "It was an act of profound human kindness. You helped me when I was at my most vulnerable. My sister, she was in a serious accident. That call, that connection was everything to me in that moment. You didn't just fix a phone. You restored my lifeline. You gave me back a piece of my sanity when I felt like I was losing it." She paused, her gaze intense, unwavering. "And for that, you were punished. That is an injustice, Caleb, plain and simple." Caleb felt a prickle behind his eyes, a sudden, unexpected surge of emotion. To hear his act described in such terms, to have someone validate his decision, was a powerful balm to his bruised soul. He swallowed, trying to regain his composure. I couldn't charge you," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were clearly going through hell." A small, genuine smile returned to Natalie's face. "And that, Caleb, is precisely why I'm here." She reached into her elegant handbag, pulling out a sleek, black business card holder. She extracted a card and extended it towards him. "My name is Natalie Thorne." Caleb took the card, his fingers brushing hers again. This time, her touch was warm, confident. He looked down at the card. The letters were embossed, a subtle, elegant design. His eyes widened as he read the title beneath her name, CEO, Innovate Solutions. And then the company description, Pioneering Accessible Tech Repair and Service Solutions. He looked up, his gaze meeting hers. A silent question in his eyes. His mind raced, trying to process the information. CEO? Innovate Solutions? The name sounded familiar, a buzz in the tech world. He vaguely recalled headlines, articles about a brilliant, reclusive tech entrepreneur who had made a fortune revolutionizing something. He hadn't paid much attention, lost in the minutiae of his own work. But now, here she was, in his living room, a tech millionaire, the beneficiary of his act of free service. The twist reveal hit him with the force of a physical blow, leaving him momentarily breathless. The irony, once bitter, now shimmered with an almost fantastical glow. "Innovate Solutions?" he finally managed to stammer, the words feeling clumsy, inadequate. You're the Natalie Thorne?" She chuckled softly, a warm melodic sound that filled the quiet room. I am. And I'm starting a new venture, Caleb. A startup focused on accessible, ethical tech repair. A service model built on integrity, transparency, and yes, compassion. Her eyes sparkled with a quiet intensity. And I want you to run it. Caleb stared at her, utterly speechless. His mind reeled, trying to reconcile the weeping woman he had helped with the poised, powerful CEO now sitting on his sofa. The sheer audacity of her offer, the unexpected seismic shift it represented, was almost too much to comprehend. Run a startup? Him, a fired technician, adrift and despairing just moments ago. Run it? He repeated, the words a disbelieving echo. But I'm just a technician. I fix phones. I don't run companies. The familiar self-doubt, the ingrained modesty, tried to assert itself. Natalie leaned forward, her gaze unwavering, a subtle smile playing on her lips. No, Caleb, you're not just a technician. You're a brilliant technician with a rare skill for micro-soldering, which I've researched, by the way. But more importantly, you have something even rarer, a moral compass that points true north, a profound sense of empathy, and an understanding that behind every broken device is a person, a story, a need. That, Caleb, is the foundation of the company I want to build. That is the kind of leadership I need. She paused, allowing her words to sink in, to resonate in the still air of his apartment. The rain continued its steady rhythm outside, a counterpoint to the sudden, exhilarating thrumming in Caleb's chest. He felt a profound sense of disbelief, then a slow, cautious stirring of hope, a warmth spreading through him that chased away the lingering chill of despair. The offer was audacious, terrifying, exhilarating. It was a lifeline, flung to him just as he was about to go under. I've been planning this for a while, Natalie continued, her voice now filled with a quiet passion. I believe the tech repair industry is ripe for disruption. It's often predatory, overpriced, and lacks genuine customer focus. I envision a network of repair shops that prioritize quality, fair pricing, and genuine human connection. A place where someone like you, someone who sees beyond the circuit board, can thrive, can lead. She gestured towards him, an inclusive, inviting gesture. I've been looking for the right person to lead the technical side, to embody the spirit of the company. Someone with your unique blend of skill and integrity. And then, you fixed my phone, for free, and got fired for it. It was the universe, Caleb, pointing me directly to you. Caleb stared at her, his mind grappling with the enormity of her proposal. The long-term stakes he had feared, despair and guilt, were suddenly replaced by an unforeseen, breathtaking opportunity. His character arc, from fired technician to company co-founder, was unspooling before him, a dizzying, exhilarating narrative twist. The rain outside seemed to lighten, a faint glow appearing in the gray sky. He thought of his empty bank account, the endless rejections, the gnawing anxiety. He thought of Buster, waiting patiently for his return. And then he thought of the quiet satisfaction of helping the old man, of seeing the relief in Natalie's eyes. He thought of the intricate beauty of a perfectly executed repair, the satisfaction of bringing something broken back to life. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a chance to rebuild, not just his life, but a piece of the world, on his own terms, with his own values. I don't know what to say, Caleb finally managed, his voice thick with emotion, a tremor running through him. It's incredible, but I've never run a business. I've only ever been on the tools. Natalie smiled, a knowing, reassuring smile. You don't have to know everything, Caleb. You have the core values, the technical genius, and the leadership potential. I have the business acumen, the resources, and the vision. We'll build this together. You'll be the chief technical officer, overseeing all operations, developing our repair protocols, hiring and training our technicians. We'll start with a pilot store right here in Seattle, then expand. You'll be a co-founder, a true partner in this venture. Her words painted a vivid picture, a future that was suddenly bright, tangible, within reach. The scent of her perfume, once alien, now felt like a breath of fresh air, a promise of new beginnings. The silence that followed was different now, no longer heavy with despair, but charged with possibility, with the sheer weight of a life-altering decision. Caleb looked at the business card in his hand, then at Natalie, her expression one of genuine expectation, of unwavering belief in him. He felt a profound shift within himself, a quiet awakening. The resignation, the fear, the guilt slowly began to recede, replaced by a nascent excitement, a thrilling sense of purpose. This wasn't just a chance, it was the chance. A chance to prove that compassion wasn't a weakness, but a strength, a foundation upon which something truly meaningful could be built. He took a deep breath, the air filling his lungs with a renewed vitality. He looked at Natalie, a woman who in one profound moment had gone from a distressed customer to a beacon of hope, a catalyst for his complete transformation. The irony was sweet, intoxicating. He had fixed her phone for free, risking everything, unaware that she held the key to unlocking his own future, to elevating him from a fired technician to a company co-founder. The character arc was complete, astonishing, a testament to the unpredictable, often miraculous turns of life. "I'm in," Caleb said, his voice firm, clear, a newfound confidence ringing in his tone. A genuine, unburdened smile spread across his face, the first in weeks. "I'm absolutely in. Thank you for staying until the end. If this emotionally explosive narrative left you breathless and forever transformed, like it now and share it immediately with someone who loves life-changing tales before everyone misses this bombshell. Tell me in the comments what city you're listening to this story from.